But let's talk about interest rates for just a minute, right? I think there's a sentiment out there that okay, we went through this period of time of high interest rates, quote unquote. What's high, right? High is a relative term. But we went through this period of quote unquote high interest rates, and the Fed just lowered rates. So do we just need to kind of get by until they get down to levels they were at a couple of years ago? I think the answer to that is don't hold your breath, but I want to hear from your perspective. And Becky, maybe you could start on this one about kind of the current interest rate environment and how we should be thinking about where that might be headed.
Sure. I don't think that it's realistic, right, to expect that we're going to be financing on a long-term basis in the 3% range. I think that what we're seeing, and if you listen to different economists like we do, and you get the advice, it's looking very, very much like the long-term rates are kind of going to stay where they're at. Right. So when you're talking about financing equipment and land, you really need to use that as your cost, or what it's going to cost you to finance it. Don't be sitting around waiting and thinking that the great refinance of a few years ago is going to happen again. On an operating basis, we are seeing, as we see the Fed lower rates, 0.75% is meaningful compared to where we were a year ago, and perhaps we're going to get a little more benefit. But I think that the Fed's going to keep trying to bring those rates down a little at a time. But again, we're not going to be back in that 3% range. We're probably going to be back in the high fives, maybe low sixes over the next 12 to 18 months, depending on what happens. So that's what I'm seeing in the market. I think the Fed's trying to bring the yield curve back into a normal, or what should be considered normal, normal range. And so I think we need to have those realistic expectations that our cost of interest is not going to be what it was 3 to 5 years ago.
Yeah, that was an excellent summary from Becky. The only thing I would want to add is a reminder that what the Fed does not necessarily correlate with land notes or equipment notes. So just because the Fed has a decrease in interest rates last month, they're expected to do it again here next month. That does not mean that land notes are getting any cheaper. They've actually been going in opposite directions for about the last 3 months. So land notes are near their peak still again here. So just keep that in mind.